So I made these rough sketches a couple of years ago, and I thought, oh, pretty cool design. So okay, why not record a quick video where I take these rough sketches and make a final design of it. So let's just dig into it. So it has these circular shapes to it, which can be quite cool actually, I think, if I can pull it off. Let's see, so the idea is that the time will be, I mean, the general design is a circular shape, right? But it will be divided into 3 different shapes, or 3 different spheres, and each sphere will represent, like the first one will represent hours, and the second one minutes, and the third one will represent seconds. So I'm just playing around with the ideas of having like the big circular shapes to be the container for the time, and maybe just having these smaller ones just as like kind of like filler details. I don't think I'm gonna keep them. It's just a way. I'm like literally just exploring right now to see like, okay, is there something else I can do with the core idea? I'm not entirely sure yet, but we'll see. It's good to try things out. The symmetric shape, I think, will probably make it resemble an already really well-known brand, so kind of trying to stay away from that. Yeah, so I do like these shapes, right? Because just a little bit too much like negative space here. The good part with it is like you've been focused to like the big circular shapes, right? But I think it feels like something's missing. So I actually kind of like these smaller spheres here that fills up the gap a little bit. I'll probably reuse these actually. This one is a little bit too big since it's starting to compete with one of the time spheres. So I really need to reduce it a little bit. Alright, so we have the main concept down now, so I'm gonna put these white-ish spheres, which gonna represent to like where are we going to put the time? Like, right, so. So that can actually be pretty cool. Yeah, alright. So now that we got the big details in place, so the one thing that's missing right now is just adding the time indications, right? So let's do that. I think I'm gonna go with like regular numeric. So let's see. There we go. Actually, you know what? This is not really what I had in mind, so I'm gonna redo that. Yeah, much better. Let's move on to thinking minutes. On that one I actually want to have indices, so I was gonna try and put in some rectangular shapes just to try and balance off all the round spheres here to see if we can create a more balanced look for it. Okay, so now we have the hours, the minutes and the seconds. I need to differentiate the seconds and the minutes a little bit more, so maybe I can play around a little bit with that, see what we can do. It doesn't have to be perfect at this stage. I'm just like trying to get my ideas. So I also figured when it comes to the first one here that I think showing the hours and minutes should be a priority, right? So I'm actually thinking like the seconds like isn't as important. At least that was what I imagine. I mean, that's individual, of course, but you want to be able to show the overall time, right? So I'm actually gonna go ahead and reduce, and then maybe make this one just a tad, a little bit bigger, just so we are clear in our design, and also to create contrast. So I'm thinking maybe this one could actually be a little bit bigger as well. I'm gonna go ahead and go in and maybe add some shading to it, just to put some indication of like how it's gonna look like when it's rendered. So now, right now I'm just designing the layout, right? Even though I have a pretty good idea of how I want it to look like, this design will probably be a 3D rendered one. So I will probably model this layout in ZBrush or Blender and make a more or less photorealistic render out of it. I think I actually like it better without the centered dots, actually. I think I'm gonna go with them switched off, actually. I think it's a bit cleaner look. Sphere's a bit tedious, but I think it's worth it just to get a sense of how the design could look like in a rendered form. I'm not being like super accurate right now. I'm just trying to put the shading like just get a feel for it. I'm not really concerned about being pixel precise right now. Right, so that's cool. Let's make some minor adjustments here before we are ready to go to the next stage. So maybe for this one I'll try something different, since it doesn't really have all the surrounding spheres in it, so maybe I can make something interesting with it, with some shading. Just so I don't have it like completely flat. So yeah, maybe something like this as a start. As mentioned before, this is just a layout design basically. Just show like the layout of the basic elements and also to give some rendering indication of what a final product could look like. So from here I would take this into a modeling program like ZBrush or Blender and just model out all the shapes and shade it and light it, render it, and then you have the final step after that would be to bring it all into Photoshop to create a final render that would actually go into the product. So yeah, that's it for now. And we're back, and most importantly, with a cup of coffee. So let's pick up where we left off last time. So we created a design based on a rough sketch that I made a few years ago. And we designed it in Illustrator. So the next step would be to actually take that design and recreate it in 3D, so we can shade it, light it, render it with a more precise look. Have that as a basis for the final product. So let's get into it. So as you see here, I'm in Blender now. So I'm thinking of the first thing to do is just prepare the scene by placing the camera in the right position, with the right resolutions, etc, etc. So let's start with that. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just split this screen. So I can use the right panel as my camera and the left one just to have it as my work screen, so to say. So okay, so let's just rotate the camera so it's pointing down and without an angle. So let's do that. Perfect. Well, actually I want that one to be at 90 degrees, like that. Actually, let's zero this out. Oh, not like that. Oh, come on. All right. There we go. Let's bring it up a bit. Right, next step would be to tweak the resolution of it, so we have the right dimensions for it. So what I usually do is that the Galaxy Watch itself has a resolution of 360 pixels times 360 pixels in its width and height. So when I work, I usually work in a resolution 4 times that. So that pretty much ends up being 1440. So just set that. Here we go. Alright, so now we actually have a pretty solid start to begin with. Maybe change the lighting a little bit. Now we can delete that one and just let's add the base. And I'm gonna go with cylinder for that one. And it's not actually gonna be a cylinder like this, it's actually gonna be a pretty flat one. So I'm thinking we actually don't need, before we do anything, we don't really need all the bottom, for example. That's not really needed. So what I'm gonna do is just, if I can click on it, why can't I click on it? Oh, there we go. Delete the face. Perfect. Okay. So now let's make it flat, somewhat like that, and then let's have it just fill the screen. So with this resolution, it also pretty much it represents the screen, let's say. And same goes for this for this cylinder, right? So at some point I want to be subdividing this mesh, right? Because as you can see, it doesn't have enough polygons to actually make this perfectly round. So, but if I do it now, you'll see that the shape won't really hold. So if I put a modifier, the subdivision surface on it, you'll see that it will just smooth itself out, and we don't really want that. So what I need to do is I need to create a few extra edges that will help the form to hold up. So let's do that. Alright, so gonna see now that this is gonna work a lot better. So, see? Perfect. So there's one more thing that I feel that we need to do, and that is to smooth, like make all the polygons smooth, right? Not in a subdivision way, but just to smooth the transition from polygon to polygon. So shade smooth it, and that's better. So, and if we put a subdivision now, you'll see that, yeah, that's much better. See, so now we can subdivide it how many times we want, and we'll get no artifacts, and the edges are just smooth as butter. So, all right, excellent. All right, so let's start putting in the spheres. So one thing that I'm noticing now is that the scene isn't rendering the objects with the correct lighting. So for example, I can move this around, it won't really affect anything in the scene, right? So we just need to make sure that the scene is actually looking at the right sources when it comes to lighting. So I just switch over to the viewport shading, and here you can see we just need to, oh, no, we don't want that. So, okay. Need to put that on, and the scene world. So what it's doing now, with this switched off, it has an environment texture applied to it, and it's a pretty good texture, but that's not really what we want now. We might want to change that later and actually use that, but use a texture that's more appropriate to whatever we want to create. It's a good preview for setting up like realistic scenes stuff, but it's not really what we're going for now. So right now I just want complete control over the lighting of the scene. So I'm just gonna use scene world and the lights that I've put in. So having the scene world now is going to use whatever we have set in the environment tab, or in the let's see if I can find it. Oh, in the world tab, in the world properties, you can see if we change this now, it will change the entire kind of. So we actually want to keep it kind of neutral. Maybe let's just keep that for now. We need to switch this on to, we need to do the same here, like that. So now if we play around with the light, you'll see that it's going to be affecting the objects in the scene, right? And that's exactly what we want. Should actually put some bounce light, I think, or actually just it's not actual bounce light, but just to simulate it, so it doesn't look that flat. This one should be a little bit weaker, so it doesn't compete with the key light. One thing that I don't like, or actually I don't know if I don't like it or like it, but I think the perspective, there's a little bit too much perspective in it. So what we need to do is we need to move the camera away a little bit and change the field of view. Looking at the concept for the first design, or the first variation of it, I wanted to make the plate a little bit more interesting. So I didn't want it to be like completely flat. So I'm probably going to do something in the lines where it becomes this like bowl shape a little bit, just to make it a little bit more interesting for like picking up light and stuff. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so first thing I want to do is just isolate. I want to have lights as well. Isolate this so I don't have to be distracted with these spheres. or distracted by the spheres. So in order to get that bowl shape, we actually need to put a little bit more geometry in here. So let's start splitting the edges up a little bit. Alright, so let's play around a little bit more with the materials, since these are like the standard pretty flat materials, so I'm gonna create some new ones. It's time to make it smooth. So I'm not entirely sure about the background spheres, so we'll see if I keep them or not, or maybe I'll do something completely different with them, but for now I'm just gonna leave them. And also I think that these spheres, since they're perfectly round, I think I'm gonna flatten them a little bit, just so it becomes a little bit more interesting when it comes to picking up light. Something like that. I think that's much better. So let's go with that. Also, I'm thinking, like, because this video is being recorded, I'm thinking about if I should at some point do all of this live, like a live stream or something. So if that's interesting, just leave me a comment, and perhaps I'll make it happen with another design. So let's play around with the lights a little bit more. I want to get rid of the point lights. We should also switch the render to be the cycles one. Eve is great, but it's more, for me at least, a render that's good to preview stuff with, but it isn't as accurate as the cycles render. And now when I'm playing with lights, I need things to be a little bit more accurate. I don't worry about the noise and the render quality. I mean, I'm just gonna keep it for now, because right now I'm just previewing the window. I'm not looking at the final render just yet. So, and we'll address that once we get to it. I'm not creating any final renders for now. Actually, now with the light shift, the background spheres are actually growing on me, so I might end up keeping them after all. We'll see. So I think this is pretty good. So what I would do now is to create a fast render, or maybe even screen grab this and bring it into Photoshop. And there I would just play around with it a little bit to see, play around with contrast, do some paint overs and move things around, break things, and maybe experiment a little bit with colors. So where is this heading? Where is this heading? Before I start to go further with the 3D scene to create, set up the final render quality and all that, because rendering is gonna take time, right? So I like momentum, I like speed, and sometimes it's good to, once you get to a step where you're somewhat happy with the elements that's in the 3D scene, you have some basic lighting in which you could envision the final product. And before you get into those final stages, it's good to pause for a little bit, create a fast render. It doesn't have to be perfect. It can be a bit noisy, like this version where you see here. Maybe you can't see it because of the resolution, but it's quite noisy. And it doesn't even have to be full resolution or anything. It's more for you to simplify things. And for me, this is it. So I'm gonna bring this into Photoshop, where I don't have to be as concerned with the technicalities of being in a 3D software like Blender or Maya, or whatever software you use. Simplicity is good when you're working creatively. So I do that, play around with it, and then I have a base for what the final product is going to be like. Okay, what are the final lights I'm going to use? Final render quality, because I need to get rid of the noise, and rendering takes time. So So I'm gonna stop here for now and bring this into Photoshop. Okay, so now we got the actual render from Blender and we took it into Photoshop. So now I'll just go through it, make some notes and maybe some paint overs, play some colors and values like contrast and so on, just to see where we can take it. And I'll do this before I go back to Blender to finish off the final renders. So yeah, okay, let's get to it. So the purpose of this is not to create the actual final render, it's just to, make some notes for adjustments, play around with the render that has been done so far, because this is much faster than to play around in 3D and make adjustments to the render settings and make a new render and so on. So one of the reasons why I also want to make it a bit darker, the background, and a bit more matte, is that to create a better separation and also have a bit more variation in terms of materials, make it a little bit more interesting. Actually, I think my favorite is the monochrome version, actually. That's the beauty of doing it or doing a digital product, is that I could provide different color schemes, right? But yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with changes and the tweaks. But yeah, with this, now I can bring it back to Blender and tweak the 3D scene to start making a final render. After that, I'll make a more high resolution one, a cleaner render that I'll bring back to Photoshop. And in Photoshop, that's where the final images or final graphics for the product will come to life. Okay, so we're back in Blender again. So let's just take all the notes and the paint overs and all the adjustments that we did in Photoshop and transfer them over to Blender. you can see that there's still a little bit too much perspective, so I think I'm gonna fix that by moving the camera, changing the focal length. The edge could actually be faked a little bit, I think. Because the thing that I want is to make the this edge here represent the actual screen, right? So, and I actually want the spheres to actually expand towards the edges, but the problem is that we have perspective, so. I think I'm pretty happy with this. So I'm gonna look over my render settings and then I'll just create a more high-res render and bring it into Photoshop to do the final touches or towards the final graphical elements that would go into the product. Alright, so I just went in to do some final adjustments before I hit the render button. Okay, so let's hit render and see what happens. Okay, so I had to restart the render due to some changes that I felt I had to do, but hopefully everything looks fine this time around, so we'll see. Okay, so I do see some geometry artifacts on the subdivided spheres, on the bigger ones. I don't know if you can see due to the resolution of the video or the compression, but it's subtle, but it's there. But I'm not too concerned though, because well, one, I will keep touching this image up in Photoshop, so I can easily get rid of it. But also we have the big plates that's gonna cover big parts of the sphere, so it won't really be an issue. I'm fine with it. Okay, something that's worth mentioning is that usually what I do when I render out images like this is that I usually render these out in different layers. Like usually I have like a beauty pass, then I have a pass where you only see the ambient lighting, and then I separate all the lights into different layers, like the key light and the backlight, bounce lights. And also I used to render out different ID passes, which means that different elements would be different colors, and that would make the isolation parts or the masking part a lot easier when you composite everything together. For example, maybe these three big spheres would be the color blue, for example, and the smaller ones would be like the color red, and then finally the background would be the color green. This way in compositing it's just easier to isolate for whatever changes that you might want to do. So, but for this I think I'm fine with just having like one pass just for this video purpose. We'll see, maybe I'll end up getting back and render these out in different passes, but yeah, we'll see. And also maybe if that's something that you're interested in seeing, like how I set up all the rendering, in the node editor, then leave me a comment below, and maybe for the next one I'll show you how I do that as well. Okay, so here we are back in Photoshop again. So I created this render in Blender, and now we brought it into Photoshop. We're gonna try and take this render to a final image that would later on be used in a product. Alright, let's get to it then. Alright, I think I'm actually happy with this stage, and I would probably call it done. So traditionally what would happen now is that I would go in and chop this render up into different kind of elements that would be imported to the actual product itself. But yeah, but other than that, I mean, I think I'm quite happy. I would probably go in and do a few color variations on this, and also I would just put this graphics on the actual device itself just to see how it translates to the small screen. So I mean, From here it looks quite good, but you know, it's always good to actually test it on the device itself as well. But yeah, that's it for this video. Alright, thanks for watching.